In the meantime, a lot of attention to the midterm elections. It was a big topic of conversation when I was in Washington yesterday. Senator Mitch McConnell and Orrin Hatch on how they figure Donald Trump will help or hurt in that mix. You know, in midterm elections, Senator, it's often said the president is on the ballot, even if his name isn't on the ballot. Do you think this midterm will be about Donald Trump?
Well, it may be, but we'd like to make the election about that in Montana, North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana, and West Virginia. There's no question, and the Democrats would even concede this, that the president will be an asset.
I've never seen a president attacked continuously from day one.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think because they're afraid of him. He's effective. He's getting a lot done. The people like him. You can't help but like the guy. I mean, he's a go-to, let's get it done type of a guy. And, you know, I was the only senator who supported him.
I remember. Yeah, if you think about it, when Orrin Hatch came out for Donald Trump when he was still a surging candidate in the Republican Party, a lot of his colleagues said, you make a crazy mistake. This guy's going nowhere. Obviously, he disagreed, and the rest is history. So what to make of the role the president will play in the midterms? The campusreform.org media director, Cabot Phillips, Wall Street Journal associate editor, John Bussey, and RealClearPolitics national reporter, Caitlin Huey-Burns. Caitlin, the president is always on the ballot, I think, in a midterm. He can't not be. But in this case, a help or a hindrance? What's your sense going into
It depends on the race. Remember, the Senate map is very different from the House map. In the House, you're competing in districts in New Jersey, New York, California. That's where the Democrats' road goes. On the other hand, the Senate map is very favorable to Republicans. They're competing.
McConnell was saying they think they could pick up a couple
Democratic seats held in 10 states. The president won 5 of those deep red states. And you're seeing in Republican primaries for the Senate, a lot of them are trying to endear themselves to Donald Trump. Indiana is a good example where you have the two battling it out right now for who can be kind of the Trump candidate at this point. So he's certainly going to be a help for Senate candidates running on the Republican ticket.
To a man or woman, John, a lot of the Republicans with whom I was chatting were saying, don't underestimate or understate how positive the momentum will be from these tax cuts. Yet your own paper has indicated that it's hit a ceiling of support. Now, that might change, but for now, is there much follow-through political impact that would help Republicans?
Well, I think there is. Yeah, I think on tax cuts where people feel that their own wealth is going up, that's always going to help, and certainly from the corporate side as well. But especially if you begin to see some of the corporate tax windfall translating into investment, which it really hasn't yet. It's primarily kind of into stock buybacks and increased dividends. If people begin to see some concrete result of that, don't underestimate also just the power of the Trump personality in these races. We did that in 2016. Right. That was a mistake. It'll depend upon where people are in their lives. Are they feeling inspired? Are they feeling more aggrieved? Are they in a state that's getting hammered because of the trade problems, and they're in agriculture? Maybe they're on the list this week for the possible tariff increase. It'll depend on the economy more than anything else.
You know, a lot of it is based on who's more jazzed to go to the polls. Yeah. If you had to look at it right now, who's more jazzed?
Well, I think you would say a couple months ago it was certainly the Democrats with President Trump in office, polarizing them. But in the past few months, I think a lot of the Second Amendment issues, for example, have been things that have motivated some Republican voters who may have been ordinarily apathetic. They now look at the news and they see issues they care about really being threatened. And I think that's something that could be motivating them, increasing their enthusiasm to get to the polls. But when we talk about President Trump's impact on the race, not only does it matter what states he's going to, it also matters what Trump is going to be going. Is it going to be the Trump of the 2016 campaign, kind of the rallying, rhetorical Trump, or the thoughtful Trump that we saw at the town hall just this past week with Senator Rubio, kind of the more issue-based, just pushing the issues, not trying to get into the personality of it? I think a lot of people are there. And also, you got to look at the Democrats. They may be laughing, saying, oh, the leader of the party, you're wondering whether you should bring him out. The Democrats also not sure if Nancy Pelosi is going to be helping the midterm races. Some of them are trying to keep her in D.C. away. So both parties are having this issue of whether to bring their leader out.
I think they said that there were 20-some-odd races in the House where she is the fixture for Republican heads. Effective? What do you think?
Well, if you look at polling, she is an effective weight against Democrats, but in the same way that Donald Trump is an energizer for Democrats. I mean, think about the way that Donald Trump has been able to galvanize Democrats in the way that Obama and Clinton and other surrogates really on the Democratic side haven't been able to. So there's certainly the Democratic enthusiasm. The question is keeping that up. Republicans that I talked to note, though, however, that they are meeting targets among Republicans in a lot of these elections in the off year that we saw. The problem problem is that Democrats are vastly overperforming and independents are switching over. So that's something that they have to keep an eye on. And the more that Trump is out there also carries the risk, of course, of continuing that enthusiasm on the Democratic side.
I think that overperformance is something to keep the eye on, right? We saw it in the House of Delegates in Virginia, down ballot voting happening where there was enthusiasm at a level that you did not see in 2016. The people who did not come out in 2016 came out. So it's black vote, Hispanic vote, women vote, suburban women vote. That big chunk of the electorate that's in the independent zone seems to have kind of moved. And if that movement can be sustained through the 2018 midterms, then you might see the kind of change that the Democrats are hoping for.
You know, the Democratic Congressman Adam Cleaver was one of these concerned about the way Democrats have framed, even though we voted against the tax cuts, Cabot, the way they call it crumbs, Cory Booker the latest to say that, or to say that they're going to repeal the tax cuts if they get in and all, that he doesn't know if that's the message. He's as opposed to those tax cuts as they are, but doesn't like the message Democrats are sending.
I like the message Democrats are sending when they're telling people, oh, we're going to repeal the tax cuts. It's crumbs. As a Republican, that's a positive. I think when you're telling people anywhere from 80 to 90% of Americans are seeing more money in their paychecks, that's to tell those people that we're going to take that away. Those are crumbs. That's a losing.
Are you surprised when they do surveys on this? People think a third of people feel that they've seen it in their paychecks. Now, you're right. 80 to 90% is the working figure you go with who have or ostensibly have. But a third feel it, not 80 to 90%.
Sadly, it's not surprising, though, because people are so convinced that anything that's coming from Trump has to be negative. That's what they're getting from the media
even when
and
they
from
see
politicians.
It in a check.
I think a lot of people, though, are assuming, oh, there must be a catch here. There must be something else. Because it's coming from Trump, it must be evil. But as it begins to wear on and people see that there's no catch, the economy is going to continue to hum as a result of this. I think that, again, saying that's crumbs, telling hardworking Americans that an extra $400 in your paycheck is nothing, that's a losing talking point for the Democrats. Republicans should seize on that.
Yeah, that was Cleaver's.